Good afternoon. Last time, which was also the first time, I gave this speech was in Singapore. I had half an hour, so now I have to accomplish it in 15 minutes, so I will have to double up my speed, but I have a clock, so I can keep an eye on what I'm going to say. So I will try to convince you in 15 minutes why I think we need a new energy model, and why I also think for you guys, for the crowd, to step in and accomplish that. I think everybody is familiar with the old energy paradigm. It's based on central power stations, typically coal or nuclear, typically 1,000 megawatt big power plants, who are transmitted over long transmission and distribution lines to a customer that today is a little bit addicted, I think, to that energy and totally ignorant what he's consuming, how much and for what. A little bit in the talk will be also my life story. As a kid, I already had a dream of free and abundant energy. And at the time, I thought that nuclear fusion might be the answer. And we talk a lot about disruptive technologies, but if you look back 60 years, nuclear energy at the time definitely was disruptive. It did end the Second World War, and I'll come back to that later, one of the advantages. But it was mainly the military that adopted nuclear with ships, satellites, and especially the nuclear weapon program itself. But the dreams, a lot of the dreams we had at the time couldn't be realized. Prototypes were built, but they never made it commercially. The planes didn't make it. Some trains, there is one in Russia, but we never saw a prototype of a nuclear-powered car. And after my studies in Belgium, I went to MIT, and I had my first disappointment there, that fusion was not really going to be the answer. It's a dream of many physicists, but a nightmare for most engineers. At the time, we believed it would take 50 years before fusion would be commercialized. Today, I'm telling you that at least it will take another 50 years. And 50 years from now, somebody will be telling you or your children the same story. My first job was in fast breeder reactors, and there again, the same story. The dream was to breed more plutonium than you consume uranium, but we had a lot of technical problems, delay, public opposition, and the picture on the left is Super Phoenix, where I worked and had been shut down. On the right, you see a similar reactor in Germany, Kalkar, who now is an amusement park. I didn't spend another 7 years as director of the Belgium Nuclear Research Center to come to the conclusion in '95, when I quitted the industry, that the risks and the disadvantages do not outweigh the benefits, or the benefits are not sufficient to cover the risk. And you talk about proliferation risk, safety risk, which we had with Chernobyl and then later on with Fukushima, and also solution for the waste, where most countries today still do not have a final solution for their spent fuel. I'm going to give you two positive things, though, giveaways about nuclear, is no other technology has ever been scaled up so fast as the nuclear industry. And you see it here on this slide. On the top, Sweden, France, and Belgium, in about little more than 1 decade, they totally converted their electric production into nuclear. France went up to 80% of its nuclear capacity. Belgium up to, at one time, I think 2/3 of the production of our electricity was nuclear. Today, it has dropped because some of the reactors are shut down. And what you see also on the slide is that Germany, for instance, despite the tremendous efforts they did with the energy Wende, it's only a fifth or a sixth in energy produced in 1 decade span per person. If you look on China, is also up there. It's about 2 megawatt hour per person per year that China has established over the past decade with its coal-fired plants and also its massive solar and wind program. So if we have to act fast because of climate change or whatever, we maybe not count out nuclear totally because it has been one of the technologies that has been scaled up very fast in the past. And the other advantage, and then I stop with nuclear, is also its density. There is no other fuel that is as dense as a nuclear pellet. For one big 1,000 megawatt power plant, you can fuel it with 5 truckloads of nuclear fuels for one and a half year. If you have to do that with coal, for instance, you would need a train, maybe 600 kilometers long every day, to bring the fuel to that power station. So I try to calculate the total coal production today, which is about 40% of our electricity production. You would need a train that, that has 20 times the circumference of the Earth to have an idea of the volume of coal that humanity today is consuming every year. So it's interesting to note that 40 years ago, fossil fuels were 80% of the energy mix. At the time of the Club of Rome, who already warned us about the problems we would be facing. 40 years later, it's still 80% of our energy mix, with that difference that we consume twice as much. And if you look the projections 20, 30 years from now, it still will probably be 80%. So we had a workshop at 2 o'clock, and I think one of the solutions definitely will also has to be to capture the carbon, because we will continue to emit more and more in the future. 10 years of my life I spent looking at alternatives like biomass, pellets, biofuels, and biogas. And it may be solutions in certain countries and certain local areas, but on a global scale, it's not possible either. The Earth is not just big enough to replace all our coal by wood pellets or replace all our petrol and fuel by biodiesel or bioethanol, or replace natural gas by biogas. So I looked also at the flows of energy and where it's used for, and the interesting there is that, which maybe gave me some hope, is that 50% of the energy is wasted. And if you look at electric power production, we waste about 2/3 of the energy. If you look at transportation, it's 3/4, and in lighting, we even waste more of the energy. So at the moment I was hopeful till I saw these slides, is that even if we in Europe cut out all the waste, we see that on a worldwide scale, the energy consumption will still double. And the reason for that is mainly the developing countries, where population is growing, energy needs are growing, and coming to this picture that we really have to rethink and radically change our energy model, because planet Earth just isn't big enough. So to determine what the characteristics are of that new energy paradigm, I went back to my childhood dream and tried to come up with some of the characteristics. And I think rather than centralized, it should be decentralized. Rather than a few, it should be many. It should be everywhere and ubiquitous. It should be small, cheaper, probably not based on the fixed rates we have now, probably closer to the production should be closer to the consumer. And for a moment, I thought offshore wind was the answer, because I spent 4 years of my life helping a Belgian family build 2 offshore parks here off the coast of Belgium, Belwind and Noordwind. Till I started realizing, checking these characteristics, that's still part of the old paradigm. Because 1 is heavily subsidized, 2, you need extra infrastructure, because it's not enough to have the windmills off sea. You need transmission to bring it to coast. You also have to reinforce your grid, because it's not strong enough. On top of that, you have to improve the interconnectivity with other countries. You need big investments to connect with UK and Holland. And then, for those who have read local newspapers, you would need even an atoll built in sea to store the energy. So all these additional investments would be needed, and most likely the cost will have to be paid by the households. So a long story just to say that I think the only source of energy that fits in this new paradigm is solar, because the sun shines for everybody everywhere, and also the amount of energy we get from the sun is a factor of 1,000 more than we need today. The other positive things why I think solar is the future, if you see this line that we see in electronics and telecommunication, the law of more, we tend to see also in photovoltaics, that prices go down continuously. And the price is already around or even lower than €1 per watt. The only disadvantage of solar is that it only shines on one side of the earth, and you probably need it mostly in electricity at the dark side. And so some people advocate you need big transmission lines to bring it from the one side to the other, or the other solution, which I think we are very close to also right now, is that you can store it between day and night. And I think Tesla made a lot of publicity about its battery. I think they built a factory much too big for electric cars. They will never sell enough cars for the batteries they will produce. So they came up with this nice idea to also use the battery in the house. But there you can only store between day and night. If you want to store between winter and summer, you will probably also need another carrier, which could be hydrogen. And I think there also the technology is very close to be implemented also at a household level. And another reason why I think that the market is ripe for the crowd is that prices have gone up tremendously. And we are at the moment, also in Belgium, we had 5 price increases of electricity already this year. They announced another one for January, beginning of next year, that for households, the prices since electricity was liberalized has gone up with at least a factor of 3, there where the wholesale prices for the big utilities is dropping. So I'm anticipating that in Belgium, the same as in Germany and Denmark, the wholesale price will be about 30 euros, but we as households, we pay 300 euros, almost 10 times as much. So that's why I think that it's time for the crowd to step in, and I borrowed this from a friend from peer-to-peer, where you can see where energy sharing could be similar to the car sharing of Uber or the home sharing with Airbnb. And where the crowd could come in, or where the crowd has come in the past, is in the old paradigm, mainly in protesting against these big centralized power stations like nuclear, or crowd grouped to get better prices from their supplier in the procurement. We have seen the last 5 to 10 years also crowd involvement in smaller projects closer by, like a windmill in your village. And often it's the big utilities again who entice the crowd to step in order to get rid of the NIMBY effect, not in my backyard, to buy the local opposition into the project. They give a little piece of the pie, a little bit of equity or a loan at attractive conditions. But, and that's what you see also. Some crowds form a cooperative and invest themselves, especially in Germany, you have seen this, the evolution of co-ops to about 1,000 people. And there actually half of the new installed capacity in renewables is owned by individuals or by crowds. But where the real potential is, I think, in the future, is in at the low voltage level, where crowds can produce, can share, can trade, but we need a platform for that. We also need change in regulation, but that didn't stop Uber, because today I cannot sell legally electricity to my neighbor. But I've learned this week that we shouldn't care about that, just do it, and then legislation may change later on. And I just want to show a few companies I came across, and some are in the crowdfunding stage on the monitoring. Mona and you know what, are developing tools that you know what you are consuming, because today You probably only see it once a month, or at the best once a year when you get your bill. There is some technology being built for nice a mobile windmill that you can use when you go camping or on vacation, or also install in your garden and just plug in. And you see already some platforms. They are not the real peer-to-peer platforms, but like Erwin has experience with, if you don't have solar panels on your own roof, you can put them somewhere else, but still benefit from the production there. But what we really need, I think, is a peer-to-peer platform. I think all the pieces of the puzzle are there, but we need people like you, people from the crowd, to really bring the pieces of the puzzle together and give the power back to the people. Oof. 0, 0, 0, 0. My time is up. Thank you very much.